Welcome to the Rising Laterally podcast. This is Jay Ballou. I co-host the show with my great friend Arjun Sachdev. Since we began inviting guests onto the show in September of 2020, we've had 14 incredible people join us in conversation. If you're a newcomer to Rising Laterally, we wanted to give you the opportunity to get to know each of them and their thinking before we move forward into 2021. So today's show will feature memorable moments from our time with each of these unique guests. First up, from episode 11, we bring you Steve Melen, author of Killer Graces, My Path from Pain to Power and Breakthrough Living. Here Steve discusses his twin battle with aggressive stomach cancer and opioid addiction.
I think addiction might have even been harder than the cancer, okay? Because, and the reason why is the cancer, I had this cancer and I didn't really question what I was gonna do. I mean, I had to pick which hospital to use, but they said, you're gonna do this, then you're going to do chemo, then you're going to do radiation, and then you're going to go through these steps and you're going to have scans every 3-6 months, CT scans. And I just did it. Okay. So now give yourself, now I had built this persona of a person who liked to have fun and was going to grab life and just do everything. I mean, I've run with the bulls in Pamplona. I've been to Mardi Gras. I've been to parties all over the place. I've done these really wild and fun things. And I just wanted to continue exceeding that. And so I think that the addiction was hard because it was a choice. Like I really didn't have to give it up. Like I could go to the liquor store and grab a beer, or I could still get medication because I was complaining about pain and they would still give me whatever I wanted. And I could still do it. And that's the hard thing. It was really by choice that I had to do it. And I had some big contributing factors that, now my daughter is starting to get to be, 5-6 years old. And I was not behaving. I was drinking too much on my own and isolating and not feeling very good. And I got into this cycle. First I had to detox from the pain meds after a year. And that was suicidal, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't realize how terrible that would be. Getting off of opiates was, I guess it's like heroin, and I've never done heroin, but I was taking 20 Oxycontins a day, and that, 20, so 400 milligrams, and that's a lot for anyone who knows about, the pill use. That was a lot, and I was 100 pounds, so I had lost a lot of weight. I couldn't digest things. I was missing organs. I had been to chemo and radiation, and I was just popping.
Sounds like a living hell at that point.
It was, looking back, it was very terrible. I was just trying to get through every day. And at this point now that I've survived the cancer, well, after a year or so now, I've got a wife who's getting frustrated with me because I'm taking these pills, but you don't understand how tough it is. It's so hard, and so I got to a breaking point with the pills that I was running out. I took my month's supply in 2 weeks. And so I'm like, that's it. My hands up. All right. So I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to just stop taking the pills. Well, that was like, jumping off. I probably would have shot myself if I had a gun. It was so bad. It took me a month overall, but the first week I couldn't even get off my floor. I look back at myself and now when I see people, like when I see the things they say out of their mouth, and then what's going on, it's like I can see in that layer behind what they're saying. Like there are so many people that do not feel as comfortable with where they are in their life, what they're doing, what it is, and I see it already. And it's like they don't even have to tell me. So what I find is if I disclose a little bit in our conversation, next thing you know, they're telling me about all the shit that's going on and that they'd never tell anyone else. And I go, is it just me, or they just need that outlet, or what is it that in people that needs to actually admit that things aren't perfect? Because life is far from perfect. And I think that I was trying to pretend that it was perfect. Oh my God, it was so unperfect.
From episode 12, we bring you Pankaj Sharma, CEO of iBridge Capital. Here, Pankaj shares his origin story growing up in India and the mindset he adopted to defy the odds and flourish.
When I was in India, I grew up in a very small city in India and was part of a really small community. Grew up with like a joint family. We had more than 20 people living in a very small, like a tiny house. I grew up with my two sisters, the younger sisters, my father and my mother. We lived in basically one room, which was the living room and the kitchen and the washroom and everything. Bedroom was just one room. So I lived in that room for almost 25 years, the first 25 years of my life. And I never actually imagined that you could have something better in life for the first, I would say, 23, 24 years. And yeah, I had just small dreams to just become like, get a job, a consistent job, and just get like consistent salary so that I can somehow contribute in my family. But in the very early like part of my life, my father went through a severe like a depression. He was diagnosed by bipolar disorder, and he went through a lot of health issues in the first, like, I would say 15 years or 17 years of my life, and he was basically in and out the hospital. So that didn't allow me to learn and to play and to learn like normal kids. I was like working labor jobs with my mom, kind of trying to help her with my dad's expenses, and just to kind of fill in his shoes in some small way. And at the same time I was going to school as well. So yeah, so I think in very early I learned how hard work is important and how you can basically like get through everything through hard work. So something I learned since my childhood, and that took me to a journey where I never settled in, and I always wanted more. And there's, for some reason, I was really content with what I had, because I kind of looked back and I saw, oh, this is better than before. So I had that contentment, but I also had that urge to grow more, and I kept going further and pushing my boundaries, and started off with opening up like bank accounts in my first job, like door to door in India, in my city, and started opening those bank accounts. From there, learned how to trade stocks, and like kind of learned stocks street way. And and then from there I become self-employed, my own business, and started trading stocks on behalf of people. I got really successful, and that's where I tasted success for the first time, and a lot of like I made a lot of money, and actually like I kind of broke out of that poverty, or if you want to call like a lower middle class life my parents
Nice.
were living. So I was really kind of was able to take on 100% responsibility for my parents by the age like 22, 21. I was in a very like a small confined society, and they used to call me Sheikh Chili. So the word did not like the word means somebody who always shoots more than he can. So like like, oh, you are just like shooting for the moon. You can't even shoot in like two feet from here, right? So I never actually like, it never bothered me. It actually made me happy internally. I'm like, oh, one day I'm gonna like, that's how I used to tell myself. I'm like, one day I'm gonna do it, and then you're gonna be like, oh, right? Because I don't know, I had this idea that if you try enough times, you can do it.
From episode 13, we bring you Mark Warren, an industry leader and mentor with over 30 years of experience in financial services. Here, Mark shares how simply nailing the basics can set you apart from your competition.
Yeah, so I've had the pleasure of mentoring a lot of young people over the years, and now as I'm getting older, it seems like that's just part of of who I am and who I am within the organization that I'm a part of. But even when I look at college kids that we mentor to bring them into our organization, there are a few things that I see that typically continue to be, how would I use the term, non-negotiable, I guess. So I mentioned one of them earlier, the idea about being on time. So I'll just tell you a little story background might help with this. So a young lady at her college took an internship. They hired 12 kids this semester, and she got hired. She did the internship, and it was with the prison system, the local police department, and the university. And it was a gang intervention kind of program. And they were trying to get kids out of gangs early, identify them as high risk to gangs, and then give them after school activities and things so they wouldn't get into gangs and they would choose other activities. After the first semester, she got hired to be the student liaison that would hire the next 11 individuals for those intern roles. And she was going to get paid a whopping $11 an hour on top of it, where the first semester she did it for free as an internship. And in the conversation I had with her, I asked a question, and her answer actually astounded me in its simplicity. And I said, why did they choose you? Again, we're getting back to the brand thing, Arjan, that you asked earlier, about how do you become one of the two or three, right? Shelf of the mind theory. 12 people could get this job. They're going to pick one. I got it. how did I do it? And it wasn't because you were smart, and it wasn't because you had the highest grade point average, and it wasn't answer. What it was, and this is her answer to me directly from her tongue. I showed up on time, I dressed appropriately, and I didn't text while I was working. Let me just repeat that. I showed up on time, I dressed appropriately, and I didn't text while I was working. And I would submit, whether you're doing that as an internship, out of school, or whatever, if you show up and you have a professor that's going to write a letter of recommendation for you for grad school, and you don't show up on time, and you're texting him while you're in his office, and you don't dress appropriately, you're not going to get a letter of recommendation. It's just not going to work that way. So literally, I was at the beach this weekend with a person that runs a very large surfboard company in Southern California. And we were having a conversation because I was in their shop earlier last week to pick up some surfboard stuff for a trip. And it was really interesting because the person I was talking to was talking about an employee they've had for a long time who's a really good employee. And then I said, how's it going with all the other employees? Because you turn over a lot. And he goes, we turn over employees weekly. We hire them, we get rid of them within a week. And I said, really? What are the reasons why you get rid of them? And he said to me, 35 years in the surf industry, they don't show up on time, they don't dress appropriately, and they're texting while they're working, and they're not saying hello to our customers when they come in to buy stuff.
From episode 14, we bring you Chi, a psychedelic advocate, guide, and retreat facilitator. Here, Chi shares his personal relationship with psilocybin mushrooms.
But, I'm in a constant spiritual emergency and a crisis. So every time I take mushrooms, I'm in oh God, I don't know what else to do with my life. There's nothing but the mushroom, nothing else is working basically. So for me, it's for me, I utilize mushrooms and I commune with mushrooms when I am I don't feel like I need to take it when I'm happy. When I'm unhappy, I need to see myself and to dive deep into the root causes. So yes, and pretty much everyone in humanity is more or less in a spiritual emergency now. So, it's all about set and setting, being in nature as much as possible. You don't want to be taking big doses in cities where you have neighbors that might call the cops on you, or that might knock on your door while you're having a bigger dose. And if you do live in a city and you can't get out for some reason, then it's good to microdose and take some smaller doses. You really have to play around with the balance and seeing how much space and time there is for, to go into oneself, and what are one's responsibilities, and then shifting priorities. Instead of scrolling Facebook for 10 hours a week, maybe I can set half of that time apart to go into nature. It's really just these little things that make a huge difference. So what is sucking time? And I'm very guilty of basically wasting my days, because it's, for me, I know every step I take on this journey just opens up the door to more people reaching out. And sometimes it's really, I want to just escape, right? I just want to play a game, or I just want to not deal with anybody. Sometimes I go, I don't want to deal with anybody who's sick. It's too much. I'm sick, So, but, going on mushrooms opens my heart again so that I can go in it with compassion instead of this resistance. So,
from episode 15, we bring you Lisa Marchiano, Jungian analyst and co-host of the podcast, This Jungian Life. Here, Lisa shares how taking responsibility for the things in your life that are within your control can make all the difference.
This goes to something that Jung never talked about directly. It wasn't a psychological concept that existed until, I forget if it was just at the end of Jung's life or shortly after. Jung died in 1960, I think it was 1961. There's this concept called an internal versus external locus of control. And as you might guess, having an internal locus of control gives you a sense of agency, that you have the ability to influence what happens in your world. An external locus of control is a sense that it doesn't matter what I do. No matter what I do, things are just going to happen to me. Psychologists have studied this and found that people with an internal locus of control are more likely to be resilient in the face of trauma, for example. An internal locus of control generally leads to better outcomes in life. Generally, I'm going to talk about some exceptions.
Mm-hmm.
But an internal locus of control, when you think about it, it starts to look awfully like what the Stoics encouraged, that kind of attitude of really taking radical responsibility for your life. And Jung was kind of down that same path. He says somewhere, the question is, he says something like, I'm going to paraphrase it. He says something like, it's easy to blame your parents for what happened to you. But a really mature person will say, who am I such that these things have happened to me?
Mm-hmm.
So, you have to be careful there because it sounds like, sort of victim blaming. But
Right.
That is a really profound question, no matter what has happened to you, to say, who am I such that these things have happened to me? And when we get to ask that question, it's a very psychological question. Then we're really taking ownership of ourselves and responsibility of ourselves in a really radical way. And we're in that realm of a kind of internal locus of control. I think that if we find ourselves disempowered or kind of stripped of our usual agency because of COVID or any other circumstances, it certainly is true that there are life circumstances that take away our agency. I'm not in favor of any of these kinds of positive philosophies where we're just going to manifest the reality that we want. No, the world doesn't actually work that way. But we can ask ourselves, where do I have agency? Where can I take responsibility for my life? There are things you can do. And I think that's kind of the point of that internal locus of control. It's like, okay, there might be things I can't do, but what can I do? And if I can keep on riffing on this for a minute.
Yeah.
I want to say that where having an external locus of control can be adaptive is if the world is really crushing you and you are in that internal locus of control place, you're like, I'm gonna fight it. I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna see what I can do. You might just be spending yourself uselessly. Sometimes it is better to just say, hey, there's nothing I can do. I'm just going to accept what's happening. That can be adaptive as well. And this is where the serenity prayer that they teach you in AA is a great piece of wisdom. It's, grant me the courage to change the things I can. That's the internal locus of control. The serenity to accept the things I cannot change. That's the external locus of control. And the wisdom to know the difference. And that's the hard part.
From episode 16, we bring you Benjamin Lorr, author of The Secret Life of Groceries, The Dark Miracle of the American Supermarket. Here, Benjamin discusses the dark underbelly of the American trucking industry and his time traveling with a trucker who was desperately struggling to make ends meet.
I lived in a dilettantish sort of way of riding along with this woman in her truck. But it was extremely eye-opening, as you said. I mean, so look, trucking, it's gargantuan. Everything that we touch, deal with in our lives is brought to us on a truck. And it's not hyperbole to say that. Like, that is a fact of American life, is that trucking is a backbone industry. It's the majority employer. It's the top employer in the majority of states, I should say. Something like 10.7 billion tons of freight per year, which breaks down to 350 pounds per day per person. So it's like you have 350 pounds of freight moving around on your behalf every day as a typical American citizen, which is like kind of mind blowing. Like, where did that come from? I didn't order 350 pounds of anything. But that's them's the facts, and I'm sure it's not totally equitably distributed because nothing in America is. But it is this like mammoth industry that operates in the shadows, and that I think we have an illusion of understanding about, because of course we all drive around and we pass truckers on the highway, and you're like, yeah, trucking, I get it. I've seen like Smokey and the Bandit and like some like 70s, gruffy but lovable portrayal of these like blue collar outlaws. Like, there's good guys, they'll help us fight the Nazis or whatever. Like, and the reality is that the profession has changed dramatically over the last 30 to 40 years. Like many things, and it is a theme in the book, where our race to efficiency has a lot of unintended consequences in labor in particular. And so in trucking, the truck driver really has become shifted from that middle class job into basically a disposable part of the industry. And wages have fallen tremendously. I think the stat that I use in the book is wages have gone, truckers are putting out, I think 2 to 2.5 times the efficiency, like output in terms of efficiency, and are getting paid about 40% less for that, for doubling of the efficiency. And yeah, a lot of them, and this is, I cannot argue this case exclusively with the numbers, because nobody has really put together these numbers, because one, trucking is so vast, and two, it's so in the shadows. But I found a pervasive world of debt peonage in trucking.
Yeah.
The truckers themselves would call themselves sharecroppers on wheels, and they would be lured into the industry by the promise of these middle class wages and the promise of kind of a lifestyle where they were in control. And to do that, they would take out loans to get their CDL, commercial truck driving license, or to become owner operators of a truck in a fleet. And as soon as they took out that debt to begin this lifestyle, it was then used by the companies who loaned them it as a threat to prevent them from kind of operating in a purely free market environment and being able to compete between trucking companies. They were kind of beholden to the trucking company that provided them these loans. And yeah, the result was just as grim as debt peonage in any other place or time in history. People who were just getting bled, their paychecks were just getting bled, and they were getting worked. So the woman I was with was working 70 plus hour weeks, and the week I was with her got $100 paycheck, just like bananas.
From episode 17, we bring you Dr. Charlie Cartwright, human influence and employee engagement expert. Here, Dr. Charlie shares how his painful childhood shaped his identity for the better and the opportunity he's now creating for the future generations of his family.
I'm just grateful for so many things. And it sounds strange that the negative things that happen in your life, you'd be grateful for. But I am. I had a traumatic childhood, and my father was he's an alcoholic, and he wasn't a good person. And I was just talking to someone last week about this, and I said, you know what, though? He had to be that guy for me to be this guy. He had to be. I'm not this guy. And I feel like I have a lot of empathy for other people because I wasn't shown any much. I have a lot of love for other people because I wasn't shown much. I'm kind to other people because I wasn't shown that. Right? And so I know what it feels like. And so I don't want anybody to feel like that ever, if I have anything to do with it. So I think about those things, and my grandmother, she really poured into me, and my grandfather poured into me. And so I want to make sure that with whatever life I have, that I want to honor their effort, that they would be proud of who I became, what I became, right? And then I also just am really passionate about impacting this world in a positive way. How can I do that better? And then we have this, a friend of mine said this so well, we're all born with these seeds, right? These seeds of potential. And she said to me one time, really got emotional. She said, I don't want to die with my seeds in my pocket. And I think about that too. So those are the things I think about, and that I have what you've seen. I have so much more potential than what's even been seen. And so what can I do to get that out? And I think the answer is to just be more of who I am, if that makes sense. I'm not trying to be Les Brown. I'm not trying to be Tony Robbins, but I want to be Dr. Charlie, and there's only one. Okay. And I'm unique, just like everybody else. Okay. So I want to maximize what I do. And I think that touches the most people. And so those are the things that really are on my mind. And I want to, my family history, there's only, I think, 3 of us. I'm talking about the Cartwright line that graduated college. 3, so we've been in this country for, I don't know, 150 years, and in 150 years, we only have 3 degrees. I really want to change that because I feel like a lot of the and I don't call them a generational curse, they're generational bad habits. Mm-hmm. I want to change those bad habits, and I think the way to do that is through education and that you get exposed to things. So I really want to, one of the things I think about is setting up this endowment to where if you can prove that you're in this family, you can go to college. Okay. I just want to do that. And it gets me choked up a little bit, but
I understand.
But I see this in my mind clearly. This is after I'm dead and gone. There'll be a young mother. She got pregnant when she was 14, 15, and she's got this 5-year-old little girl. And it's the first day of school, and she's getting her ready. And she's going to say to her, hey, if you do a good job in school and you stay out of trouble, you're going to go to college someday. And she's going to go to school the first day and say, I'm going to college. That's what she's going to know in her mind. That's going to happen. I've already seen it. It's going to happen. And that's how you change these outcomes for families. It's through education.
From episode 18, we bring you Michael Patterson, CEO of U.S. Cannabis Pharmaceutical. Here, Michael shares what inspired him to get into the cannabis industry, despite the risks and stigmas associated with this emerging space.
So, a guy named Saul Broida. That's my short answer. Saul, let me tell you who Saul was. Saul, S-A-U-L, Saul was a 94-year-old U.S. war veteran from World War II who, when I was doing home health care years ago as a therapist, I met Saul. And Saul's an interesting character. When I was treating him, he was 94 years old, and he was addicted to opiates. And the VA, he would go to VA here in Florida, and they said, you know what, you're addicted to opiates. We're going to take you off of them at 94 years old. So this is back before cannabis became legal in Florida, and he said he would go to Tallahassee. He would fight to make it legal. And so after seeing Saul, it was a straw that broke the camel's back for me, because I remember looking at Saul, I'm like, who can help a guy like that with cannabis? And the only way to do that is if you understand the regulatory structure of the current healthcare system and to be able to incorporate cannabis into that. So I needed a push. And so the push that I got was when the Florida tried to legalize cannabis in 2014. So I had dabbled in it in 2013, and I started doing consulting calls after doing some research with different companies. But that's where I really started to get involved. And so my big push was Saul was a guy who got me off the couch, so to speak, and say, you need to do this, because if you don't do it, nobody else is going to do it. Because I needed to use my skills in healthcare to promote this and move this forward, because what people may or may not understand is regulation in healthcare only increases. It never decreases. Yeah. So if cannabis is starting here and then you're going to sit there and go to here, well, if I've been in an industry that has this much regulation, and I can literally predict the future. So after going to a couple conferences and saying, you can provide a lot of value here, it was a difficult, question for me, because when I got into the space, and a lot of people still think this now is, they think that you can do 3 jobs. You can grow it, you can process it, or you can sell it. And that's it. So what I had to learn is there's an entire that has to be developed for the cannabis industry to succeed. And you hit on one of them. You hit on banking, and you hit on compliance, and you hit on regulation, and you hit on a lot of different ones with technology. So what we evolved in my company, U.S. Cannabis Pharmaceutical Research and Development, has evolved to is to focus on the choke points of the industry to be able to move those forward for everybody.
From episode 19, we bring you Harpreet Sahota, data scientist and host of the Artists of Data Science podcast. Here, Harpreet discusses his conversation with the legendary poker player Annie Duke and their shared interest in Stoic philosophy.
I think data science is like the least interesting part about me.
Word.
Like real. I mean, I get paid to be a data scientist, but I mean, I don't define myself as a data scientist. I'm much more than that. But to be honest, like thinking in bets, like the concepts in that book, they started planting seeds in my mind. And as those seeds started to grow, and as I started just research more and more stuff, I realized that the thoughts that I was having due to that book were actually parallel to Stoic philosophy. And
wow.
And I talked about that with Annie Duke during the interview. I was like, I asked her how much of her work was influenced by Stoic philosophy, and she was like, "Oh, quite a lot." And I was like, "All right, well, that makes complete sense." But I guess to answer your question, being a data scientist does not affect my life's philosophy at all. My philosophy of life just came from I just needed a guide, just something to help train and discipline my character, I guess. Stoic philosophy, it's really interesting, 2,000-year-old philosophy, and I think it boils down to, and oversimplifying it, but it's just the realization that, okay, there are things that are within your control and things that are outside of your control. The things that are outside of your control are essentially everything that doesn't happen inside your head, right? So if you can't control anything on the outside, you might be able to influence them, but you can't control them. So why worry about those, right? So focus on training your mind, disciplining your mind, not letting it become overcome by anger, by passions, by just bad thoughts, right? So training your character to observe an event and not be triggered, right? So you can observe an event, you'll have some initial response, but you don't have to go with that initial response. You can pause, evaluate, and then choose a different route. It's just been driving force for me this year, I guess. And I picked it up mostly because I was never given like a blueprint for life. I mean, like I was never given a life's philosophy. And I had a son this year, and I knew that what I had didn't work for me, right? Like it took me forever to figure this out, 35 plus years. So I needed to find something for myself that I could then share with my son, right? A set of beliefs, a set of guiding principles to help you through all the ups and downs that you're going to face in life.
From episode 20, we bring you Indy Singh, proponent of laughter therapy and advocate for civic engagement. Here, Indy discusses his philosophy of service and the interconnectedness of religion, spirituality, and science.
I would like to share that, it seems that as I meditate and I sit in prayer in my own connection to the universe or God or whatever you want to call it, I consistently be this connection happens where how can I serve this creation better? Constantly, what can I do to be of more service? How can I apply my knowledge, my resources, my passion, my energy, my love, whatever it is, in more effective way, my relations with people, right? How can I turn it into service for this creation, whatever's going on, bro? I don't know. It could be it could be a computer program. It could not. It could be a simulation. It could be actually many universe. It could be a dream. The whole, whatever it is. The point is how can I be of service? And as I do that, and I continue to research and learn and study from different modes and learn from people and get mentorship, it seems that these every project I'm working on is intertwined with each other, but in a beautiful way that it doesn't matter which one works out. They're all going to be supported through that. I think about too, religiously, spiritually. I've done a lot of. I've really loved going back and forth between deep spirituality and deep science, right? And going and connecting those laterally. And for me, what I've discovered is dude, you see it also with the mystics and the teachers. They say connect with your inner child. In the Bible, it says, be like a child and you shall enter heaven. Over and over and over again in many spiritualities, it says happiness, joyfulness, being like a child. It doesn't say fuck a child. It says be like a child. That's the problem. All these spaces where all these powerful people are getting it wrong, right? But we got to bring this awareness for it. I don't know how to. I think laughter, I think joyfulness, I think psychedelics, I think storytelling, I think inventive, like innovative technologies are a way we can like start to be like, hey, look, there's more. You want to get power? Do you want to feel power? Dude, let me show you this power. There's a better power than what you got right now. Like it feels better, and even you feel better, and everybody fucking loves you, bro. They build statues for you, They'll remember you and honor you. That's the thing, right? That's why I like Carl Jung a lot, because he kind of like was connecting a thread, and he was like actually seeking. He was like a real seeker, seems like. And, like in seeking, he was finding some connected golden thread, and sharing it. And some of that golden thread was going into the shadow, like going into your unconscious, understanding mythology and how it plays into that subconscious, right? Understanding collective mythology, personal mythology.
From episode 21, we bring you Nate Johnson, professional development and emotional resilience coach. Here, Nate talks about his fascinating time abroad traveling and how sometimes the road less traveled can lead to the best results.
I was playing it safe. I had gotten a business degree, which, it was great, but it was very general. I thought it was good to be general when I realized, maybe I should have been more specific. Maybe I should have done the things that I really wanted to do in college. So I was like, maybe I need to venture out a little bit. So I started applying for jobs, and every job wanted to know what was my Microsoft Suite, extent of my Microsoft Suite skills. And I was like, I was just disgusted by that. I was like, I can't believe after all this education and, hundreds of $1,000s of college, that all you want to know is my Microsoft Suite skills. Like, this is bogus. So I was like, I'm out of here. So I moved to New Zealand. A friend of mine convinced me to do that, but 3 days after we bought our tickets, he was hit by a truck and killed crossing the street on July 4th, 2008. Wow. So that was the first real tragedy I ever experienced in my life, and I hope one of the, I hope the last or one of the very few. But it taught me that most people would have changed their plans, but I just needed to keep going just because I was going to go to New Zealand, and that was final. So I went to New Zealand. I worked as a whitewater rafting guide. Then I wanted to go to Southeast Asia, but this was during the recession, so the New Zealand dollar was pretty low. So I moved to Australia. I, through some sort of desperation, both on my part and their part, a family hired me to be a cattle rancher on their ranch in the Northern Territory outback. So I was a cattle rancher. And then I used that money to travel Southeast Asia, got in a boating accident in the Philippines, lost a lot of blood, recuperated in Guam with my great aunt and uncle, left there, went back to Southeast Asia to Myanmar. I was also known as Burma. I was in Myanmar, spent a month and a half in Bali learning to surf. I had to go back to Australia to get a job before I came back to America because I was out of money. So I came back, I went back to Australia. I was a carny in Western Australia. So I was a carny traveling up and down the west coast of Australia. There I met one of my best friends who now is like a very successful businessman in France. It's just so funny going from a carny to France, and me going from a carny to coach. We seemed so lost at the time. But I was like, okay, now I want to do something. I've experienced a lot. Now I want to do something. So I moved to New York to be an actor. But in order to afford New York, I had to get a job. So I applied for 2 weeks straight. Finally got a 2-week temp job at Inc. magazine. I'd never heard of it. Get out of the subway. I have long hair, bad fitting suit, ugly tie, no experience whatsoever. And I'm in front of the World Trade Center, number 7. I go up and I'm like, I'm never going to get this job. But find out the reason they called me in was because I was a cattle rancher, a manager on a cattle ranch. And that was just stuck out more than everybody else. So that temp job turned into a managing job of the Inc. 5000 list. So I managed the team that put that list together, even though I didn't know what Control-C, Control-V meant at the time. So these, like getting the job on the cattle ranch, getting the job rafting in New Zealand, getting a job at Inc. magazine and the World Trade Center. All these things taught me, like, it's not education is not everything it's trumped up to be. It's really good to have education, but it's not the gatekeeper that everybody says it is. And just following the rules isn't the only way to go. You can do your own thing, but then you can adapt those transferable skills across the board.
From episode 22, we bring you Joy Soto, cancer survivor and award-winning documentarian. Here, Joy shares why we should never put off telling those closest to us just how much we love them.
So I was dying, and I got to experience how much people love me, which I think was a tremendous blessing that I got to see that. It's like, I feel like people don't really experience that until after they die. I mean, so they don't get a chance to experience it, right? I know that life is really short and you need to take advantage of every moment you have with people. And I actually had a friend of mine who, her mom was going through cancer, and she kept telling me, yeah, she wants me to come and visit in 3 weeks. I'm like, but you can visit right now. Why don't you go visit right now? And she's like, and I think she was scared, because it's scary. You don't know what to expect. Yeah. You don't know how to act. And I can't tell you how to act because I don't know. I just know for me, it was hard to see people be sad. Anyway, my friend told me, no, I'll see her in 3 weeks. And then she said, oh, she's not doing very well. I got a call, but I'm going to see her in 3 weeks. And that's a plan. She wants me to stick to it. I said, I'll go with you. If you want me to go with you, I'll go with you. I have like the next 3 days off. We'll drive up there. I was up in San Francisco and I live in San Diego. And so she's like, I don't know. And so I said, okay, I'm packing up a bag. I'm going to drive to your house. And if you want me to, we will drive up there together. So sure enough, she packed up a bag. We drove up there and we saw her mom, and her mom ended up passing away that night. So we got to have that last moment with her, or she got to have that last moment. We have pictures with her and everything. And it just shows that like you just shouldn't put things off in your life to tell people what you want to tell them, because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how long you have, and just to let people know how they've affected you, or to make those like big gestures and drive up to see someone that you haven't seen in a long time.
From episode 23, we bring you Richard Lang, an author and prominent teacher of the Headless Way. Here, Richard shares how we can see ourselves as what we really are from the first-person perspective, space for other people.
This is really awakening to what it's like to be you, which is actually the easiest thing in the world, because you are you. And what the Headless Way points out is the difference between what you look like, your appearance, the one you see in the mirror, the one that others see, the difference between that and what you are at zero distance, what you are from yourself. And when you look at me and see Richard, that's because you're about 6 feet away. And I, however, am at zero distance from myself. So I'm obviously going to look different from what I look like to you guys on the screen and in the mirror and so on. And when I look, I find that I don't see my own face now, right here. And the listener and the viewer, if you want to know what I'm talking about, just be aware of your own point of view. And as you're listening, just notice you can't see your own face. And there's a lot to explore in this, but you can't really argue with that. Do you see your own face? No. What do you see instead? The world. And normally, we are not aware of that. And I suppose if someone points it out, you say, so what? What's the point of that? I suppose part of my job is to say, well, some of the implications of this are just fantastic. And first of all, is it true? What are you from your own point of view? And secondly, if it is, what value might it have? And I'll just say one more thing. That one of the values is that when I'm with people, I notice that I see their face, I don't see mine. It's face to no face. I am empty for you. And this is a very different way of relating. From the outside, we're head to head, face to face. I understand that. From the inside, though, I am empty for you. I have your face instead of my own. And you see, I've been with this for a long time. And I was introduced to this when I was a teenager. By Douglas Harding, who wrote On Having No Head. And I made friends with him and all his friends. And we were friends. It wasn't teacher-student. He was saying, if you value this, just come and visit. So I did. And I got to know a whole load of people when I was in my teens and so on, who were aware of this. And once you become aware of this, you can't pretend you've got something that someone else doesn't have, because it's not like that at all, obviously. And you can't get better or worse at the fundamental thing. If you practice it, it will develop in your life in terms of your understanding and how it affects your life. But the thing itself is non-hierarchical. So I have no idea that I've got it more than you guys. I mean, how could you?
Right.
But our understanding and our response to it is different. Now, I grew up in a mini society of people who were aware of this. And it's infectious. And you benefit by having friends you can talk to about it. Because out in normal society, if you say, I'm space for you, they'll go, what? No, you're not.
Right, yeah.
You know? So when you're in a society like this and with friends who are sharing this, and you go, I'm space for you, and say, yeah, I know, it's great, isn't it? I'm space for you.
From episode 24, we bring you Dr. Keith Campbell, social psychologist and author of The New Science of Narcissism. Here, Keith discusses the archetype of the hero's journey and the true cost of self-transformation.
This reminds me, I don't know why this stuff is all triggering things, but I'll go with Nietzsche because you brought up Jung. In Zarathustra, he has the parable of I don't remember what he calls it, the parable of the three metamorphoses, maybe it's the metamorphosis. So you start off as a camel and you carry as much as you can and you walk into the desert. And eventually in the desert, you turn into a lion. And as much as you carried as a camel is how big you are. So if you carried a lot, you're a big lion. You didn't carry much, you're a little lion. And you turn into a lion and you see a dragon. And on the scale of that dragon, it says, thou shalt not, on every scale of the dragon. And you kill the dragon. And when you kill the dragon, you turn into a child. And the child says, yes. So that was Nietzsche's idea of creativity, which was, if you don't learn all the stuff, if you don't do the hard work, if you don't work through the real system, if you don't learn how to paint, if you go, I'm going to be a surreal artist without actually learning how to paint a portrait.
Yeah.
If you don't do the hard work, if you're like, I'm going to be an out jazz musician without learning 4/4 time,
Right.
You're not going to get there. But if you do that hard work, you're going to become a lion. And then you're going to see where they say, you can't do this, Keith. You can't study this stuff. You can't study. And you're like, yeah, I've been doing this for 20 years. I can do whatever I want. You can't stop me. I don't care. That's that transformation. So for Nietzsche, it was like putting in all this work. And eventually you got to this point where you go like, I can just express myself freely. And you see this with a lot of great musicians who put in the time, they put it in, and then they can just express creatively. My concern is the people that are like, I'm a genius. I'm going to skip all the hard work and start doing genius stuff and hope I get discovered. And the story, when, some people like the story I want to tell is I'm just awesome. And that's my story. I'm awesome. But that's not a very good story. The story everyone wants is the hero story. It's the story of I was here and I kind of thought I had it together, but something drew me away. And I went through these adventures and I really fell apart. I thought I was going to lose it all at the bottom. It was awful. But I learned some stuff, and then I came back and I worked my way back, and now I have these boons, these gifts I can bring to people because I've been to the bottom of the well and I've come back up again and I'm shining like gold, So it's that hero's myth, or that hero's journey that people like. They want to watch that. That's the story we want to watch. But when it becomes to your own life, you're like, yeah, I want to be the hero. But you're like, well, what happens to a hero? He dies. He goes in the trash compactor. He's eaten by the whale. He goes to the bottom of the ocean. He loses it all. He doesn't know who he is. He has to break his whole self into pieces. You're like, I don't want to do that part of it. I just want to do the cool shit.
Yeah.
I just want to stand over the dragon's body and look like a legend. But if you read the story of like Sigismund, Sigmund Freud, the name comes from like Sigismund, the hero. And I think in the story, he kills the dragon and he hears the sounds of nature. That's what happens. So when he kills the dragon, it's not like he was a hero. He heard the sounds of nature. It's self-transcendence.
Right.
And But that's not the story you think. You think the hero stories, you walk in with the dragon on the head, and then you're like, get all that, you know, you get the king's gold and everything, and everyone thinks you're a legend. But really, the story is you lost yourself in the process. But by losing yourself, you gained yourself.
Thank you for listening. Arjun and I hope to have you join us this year for a new lineup of unique guests in 2021.